Hi, everybody. Lindsay, are we coming back on now?
Yes, all yours, Nell. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Fantastic. So thank you all for being here, both to celebrate Digital Inclusion Week and to do some digital work ourselves. Thank you, Jan. I see that you introduced yourself in the chat. It's fantastic if people want to introduce themselves in the chat. We've got quite a large group, so we're not going to do it out loud. As we go through the session, feel free to put questions or comments in the chat. I will have a few questions, and if you want to answer those in the chat, that's fantastic. And anything we don't get to during the session, I will make sure to add back into my slides. So you're going to have a link to the slides, and I'll update that at the end if there's things that we weren't originally covering. I see some people I already saw this morning, so that's fantastic. And lots of folks from all over the country. It's very exciting. So my name is Nell Eckersley, and I work at the Literacy Assistance Center in New York City. And the session today, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let me give you the link to the slides first. 1 second. And I'm guessing these are going to be shared out too. I know we're recording, so you'll also get a recording of today. But okay, so let me share these. All right, so today we're talking about EdTech tools and how they can be used to develop and strengthen digital skills for real life. My experience, I come to this from being a ESL teacher many years ago, and then training teachers on using technology. And before the pandemic, we were talking about integrating technology, and now I feel like we talk a lot more about integrating technology and digital skills. So we're looking at the digital skills that these tools force us to learn and strengthen. So the goal of today is we're looking at some tools you probably used before, or you might not be familiar with them, but we don't just want to look at them for what they provide us as teachers in the classroom, but also the skills to use them and how those are skills that are actually things that people are going to use in their everyday life. And I got to this idea from my own many years of studying Spanish in high school, junior high school, college, and that so much I know there's that idea that you want to the language that you're taught is often related to the space that you're in. So we learned eraser and chalk and a bunch of vocabulary that was very useful in the classroom, but actually didn't have very common use in my everyday life. Whereas like going to an ATM and trying to figure that out in Spanish was something that would have been great for me to learn. So we want to look at that from that perspective. There are so many digital tools out there, and it's very hard to choose. And there's really not a right or wrong, but we'll talk a little bit about how to think through that today. And with this underpinning of both wanting to make the learning experience more robust and exciting and engaging, and then also think about the skills that these tools require. So without further ado, I'm gonna move along. So again, welcome, Digital Inclusion Week, yay! I hope you've been celebrating it other ways. COABE has put together this wonderful series of workshops all week long. And there are lots of other things going on too. I know in our city and state, we have a variety of things. We actually got for the first time ever, I requested a citation from our mayor, and our mayor sent us a citation for Digital Inclusion Week. And I believe there's in Buffalo, actually, I didn't think to say that, Lindsay. I think that the Peace Bridge is going to be teal tomorrow at sunset, and was like that on Monday for Digital Inclusion Week. So we're getting there. We're getting some recognition. So we're going to talk very quickly about digital literacy. You all are doing it, I'm sure, or know, or I'm not going to go deeply into that. But we're going to go into QR codes, Quizlet, and Google Classroom, and we're going to talk a little bit about a way to think through how we use digital tools and the digital skills that we're introducing. So you are all, I'm very sure, seen and are kind of familiar with the definition that WIOA uses, which comes from the Museum and Library Services Act of 2010, that digital literacy, the skills associated with using technology to enable users to find, evaluate, organize, create, and communicate information, which I kind of like. It's vague. So I like it in its vagueness, and I like it because I think it fits what we think about with literacy, right? So if I was to define literacy, I might talk about skills associated with enabling users to find, evaluate, organize, create, and communicate information without technology. So when we bring in the digital piece, we're adding that new, not new to us because we're all doing it, but the additional piece of doing this with technology. And in these days, that is something we're all doing. So whenever someone hits a barrier there and can't do the thing they want to do because they don't know how, that is a major problem, and we want to help with that. Um, so that was a nice vague definition. If I'm a teacher, I'm like, well, what does that mean? How do I even begin to think about what exact skills, discrete, explicit skills I think that I want my learners to have, or that my learners tell me they want to have, or I want to have? One way to think about it is through the Seattle Digital Equity Initiative Skills Framework. This link will take you to their long list where they break out these 10 domains and have a series of skills underneath each domain. And they're still vague, like communication is a broad topic. Communicating, via email or whatever would be an area. So you can go there and pull out the explicit skills and then think about how you can practice those skills or introduce those skills with your learners. The idea is that, there's many here and they get rather broad, but I think we know like privacy and security is a high need area, skills that are needed for workplace, online life, device ownership. The gateway skills are the very, very basic skills. So there's different ways to look through here, and many skills fall into more than one domain. And a place to go get help when you want to work on this is the digital skills library that World Ed has put together, which breaks out each of these domains and has activities, tutorials, suggested tools for each of these domains. So that's a very helpful thing. So that's the digital skills library.org. And then when we think about using technology, we also want to be careful that we are using it to extend, enhance, and engage. There's sometimes a tendency, maybe SAMR is another way of thinking about this that you're familiar with. SAMR stands for substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. And it's a little more complex to think through, but the idea is that we often start using digital tools as a substitution for something we did with paper and pencil or on a chalkboard or whatever. And then as we become more adept at using that tool as a teacher, we may think of new ways to use it that actually extend and take the learning somewhere that it couldn't have gone with paper and pencil. And we want to keep that movement, that momentum, and keep thinking about ways to use these tools that are more than just a substitution and more than just because that goes away very quickly. There's a sort of magical quality, I think, to using digital tools that is attractive, but that attraction can go away over time if there's not a deeper meaning or evidence that is actually lending itself to learning. So QR codes are an area where that can be true, right? QR codes are kind of magical in the beginning. You scan it, suddenly you're taken somewhere. But after a while, that's kind of boring and it doesn't mean anything if the place we're going to doesn't have any interest for us or teach us things. So EEE framework is a way to think through this concept of extend, enhance, and engage. And the woman who developed this tells an interesting story where she was first introduced to PowerPoint and was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And she brought it into her classroom after having been doing kind of, lectures around, I think it was some historical, maybe the French Revolution, and her students were very bored and she brought it in a PowerPoint and they were really wowed. But then a couple weeks later, she's still using PowerPoint and they're not as wowed anymore because the novelty has worn off. So we don't want to rely on the novelty aspect of this. Again, when we talk about technology, it's a broad topic, and I like to use this pencil because there maybe it's an apocryphal story, but Socrates apparently was against writing because we should only be telling each other stories because we can make them personalized. So the idea of writing it down and making it permanent was negative to him. So through time, we've had many new innovations. AI is probably our most recent one where people are uncomfortable with the newness and don't know what it means yet and can feel negative about it. And as teachers, we are kind of on the forefront of this because we have to decide if it's something to bring in or not. We have to learn about it ourselves. We already have so many other things going on. So it is a struggle for sure. Luckily, there's lots of resources out there to help us with these things, and we can't escape it. So when we talk about technology today, for our purposes, we're talking about information and communication technology. Sometimes you'll see it said described as ICT. So knowing that, when we think about what we're doing with technology, it's all about information and communication. It's in various forms, right? Is it good information? Maybe not. Is it arriving in a way that you like? Maybe not. But it's all about information and communication. And if you think back, if any of you are old enough to think back before the internet, I can remember, my first email address. But I can't really remember what it was like not to have this constant stream of information. But it didn't used to be like that. Like you just got the mail that came through the letterbox, and that was what you had. Now we have all these different ways that information is just flowing past us, and certainly in recent time, it's also become much more difficult to know when information is accurate or not. So those are skills that I'm going to include here in the digital skills area. So if we were in person right now, I would ask the question, how many of you have ever watched a video on YouTube? And I'm going to imagine that 99% of you would raise your hands. I was in a room once where one person had never watched a YouTube video, but it's rare. So most of us at this point have watched a YouTube video, and we're going to call that consuming. We are so good at consuming information. And the people who make information are so good at getting it out to us. But there's some responsibilities there, right? Judging whether information is useful or not, choosing to go look for that information. How are you the person in the group who's like, let's go see a movie tomorrow. What time? I don't know what time the movie is. Are you the person who looks on your phone, or is there someone else in your group who does that? So we have this constant access to information, choosing when to look for it, choosing when not to, because that's also a good thing. Put the phones down. But consuming is what we're really good at. And you'll notice with YouTube, as an example, to watch a YouTube video, do you need to log in? No. Anyone can watch a YouTube video who has access to internet and a device. So with consuming, you'll see that most of the things we can consume, we don't need to log in for unless it's something that costs money, right? So if you're streaming services or whatever, you have to log in for them. But most content, if someone else has made it and they give you the link, you do not need an account to look at it, read it, add your own comments. Google Forms or Google Docs are a good example. I can't make a Google Doc without logging into Google, but if someone else makes a doc and shares a link with me, I can go in and add content there without having an account. So consuming, we're really good at. It's made really easy. We don't even know that we're doing it. The next step would be, my question would be, how many of you have ever made a video and put it onto YouTube? And the numbers usually go down. I was in a session yesterday and it was actually pretty great. It was like 70% probably had done this. Back maybe before pandemic, that would have been like 20%. And who knows with this crew, if you've made videos, go ahead and put it in the chat if you want to. So making a video and putting it on YouTube, that process of putting it on YouTube does require that you log in. And another question I would ask right now, if you were all in person, I would say, how many of you have a YouTube account? And often people don't know, but you automatically have a YouTube account if you have a Google account. So you may never have logged in, but if you go to YouTube and you click on that login and you use whatever your credentials are for your Google, that will get you into YouTube. So that account is just waiting for you to get into. You do need to log in to upload your videos there. And then the last piece here is playlists in YouTube would be the example for curating. So in order to curate, you also need to log in to your account on YouTube, and then you can choose videos that you like. They don't even have to be ones that you've made. They're just things you found, and you can put them into playlists, and then you can share a whole playlist. You don't have to share the individual video. And as a teacher, that's almost the most important part. I think as teachers, the role of curator is a big part of our work, right? We might be told that we have to include certain things in our lessons, and we might be given textbooks or curriculum that we have to use. But the work that we do constantly in our brains without even maybe paying attention to it is that we're curating. We are deciding what is useful, how can I explain this thing better? Where can I get the worksheets, the text, the video to help my learner get this information? So curation is a big piece of our work. But really, when we go back to the ICT, I think curation is almost what all of us need to do more of. And this is where the critical thinking comes in, and a lot of digital skills around that kind of brain stuff, because curation is how we decide what's important and how do we get back to it, which is another big challenge for us. So consuming, the people who make stuff, they want us to get it. It is easy to find. Overwhelming, perhaps, but easy to find. Creating, it does take our particular knowledge to make something that is useful, our knowledge that we are passing along. So again, as teachers, we're often creators. And then the curation. I do also want to point out, though, for the learner, it's great for everyone to be practicing this. So everything that I would suggest a teacher could do, I think that we also could talk about learners doing. So if I'm making a video and putting it up on YouTube, or I'm making a playlist and I'm sharing that link out with my learners, at some point it would be great to also bring that in as a skill for your learner to know how to make their own playlists and how to share those either with their classmates or with their family, because those are skills that are important in life. And we sometimes don't, especially around digital, where maybe we're nervous or people don't have access. The creation piece can be tricky, difficult to bring in. So we really want to keep that in our minds when we're thinking about lessons. Is there some creation piece here for the learner? So, and you will notice that I used a cake motif here. So this will continue through because it's the same with cakes, right? We're very easy to consume a cake. Some people make cakes and some people have cookbooks or lists of cakes or get their grandmother's recipes or whatever. So we do this with other things, not just with technology. So here we have someone who's enjoying their cake. And we're going to talk about, most of today is going to be talking about mobile, making sure that the content is mobile friendly. Everything that's mobile friendly is also computer friendly, but I think that a lot of our learners and a lot of us do a lot of our tech work actually on our phones, even if we have other options, and then many people don't. So phones are important here. So consuming information. So if we were not here virtually, because virtually is pretty easy. I can just put the link in the chat. I put the link in earlier for the slide presentation. That was very easy for me to do, and you have it there. I hope that the new people get to see it too, but I'll put it in again at the end. But if I was in a classroom in person and I wanted to get everybody to this link, you're all sitting there in front of me, you're at your computers, or you're sitting in front of me and you're all on your phones, and I give you this link. Are you excited and willing to try and type that into your browser? I'm guessing most of you are throwing your hands up in dismay. No, that is not a great way to get people there. Again, in a room, I've had people type it in, but I've also probably had at least a couple people who couldn't type it in, or typed it in and left out a letter and don't know which letter they left out, and now the whole class has to wait, right? So that's not useful. What could you do to help people get to this? Well, we've already cheated because I told you about QR codes, but we could shorten it, right? So there's shorteners out there. I like Bitly. There's what is this, the other one that I know? Anyway, there's many shorteners out there. That helps. So again, you could type that in, you know that it's case sensitive. So with those L's and ones can get a little confusing depending on the font. So we could even customize the shortened URL. So that's a little easier for people's minds when they're typing it in, math, ma, pa. Okay, I can do that. But how fantastic if you have phones right now sitting beside you, you can scan that QR code and get there. Now, I've been to lots of conferences recently where people give out QR codes to content that I don't really want on my phone. I want the link because I want to look at it on my computer. So in that case, I prefer them to give me the shortened URL. So the lesson to me is give both. Give a shortened URL and give the QR code. If you're giving a QR code, consider that QR codes are best if they take you somewhere that's good on a mobile phone that people want to use on their mobile phone. So go ahead and try scanning that QR code if you're brave and strong and want to try out the QR code business. Now, back when I first talked about QR codes 10, 15 years ago, you had to download an app on your phone to get a QR code scanner. Nowadays, it's usually in your camera app. So you just open up the camera, you hold your phone as if you're going to take a picture. And then in my case, I have an Android and a little link pops up and I just tap on that link and it takes me to that in my browser. So if you do decide to use QR codes, this is the first lesson is how do you scan a QR code and what happens? How do I get back to that place again later? So if you did try scanning that QR code, I broke my own rule and I took you to this. Not very mobile friendly. Now, if you have some wherewithal and you're willing to struggle, you might go up to that little tiny image up here and know that you could maybe turn your phone and then there's like a full screen thing, but that is annoying. So I give you this link because this is an amazing website with all these video clips about math. And it's wonderful for you to come back to, but it is not the most beautiful thing to give someone a QR code to. So the same video happens to also be on YouTube. So this is the YouTube link, which again is a pretty ugly link to type in. Videos are brilliant content for phones. So if you scan this QR code, you'll get to the actual video. And I'm not going to take the time to watch the video because I'm going to run out of time today anyway, but it's a fun video about different ways to figure out a math problem. And if you know Ma and Pa Kettle, it's sort of a 1950s shtick movie that is hilarious. You'll notice this QR code has this little dinosaur in it. And I'm going to open the chat just to see. Can anyone tell me, by seeing a QR code with a little dinosaur in it, if you know where I got the QR code from? Like it's a QR code. Yeah, Pamela said it. Oh, several of you got it, right? So yes. So when you are using Chrome, I'll show you how to do this, but you can make a QR code for any website that you get to in Chrome. And it will have this little dinosaur in it so people will know that it came from Chrome. But it's a really, really fast and easy way to make QR codes. You can also do it other ways, and we'll talk about one at the end. Maybe you have other tools you like better. And now a lot of digital tools will have a QR code creator inside them, so you don't even have to go out and make it separately. But this is super fast and fantastic. Okay, let me get rid of the chat again. So I'm actually going to do that very quickly for you just right now. Okay, so if I'm here, this is a brief history of QR codes, and I want to give you this link as a QR code. So I have my long link up here that would be really annoying to type in. If I go over here to my three dots and I scroll down to where it says cast, save, and share, which also tells you you could save this or you could cast it to a different device. But our exciting thing here is the share. So now I get a second drop down, and if I come all the way down to the bottom, this is the create the QR code. And now we have a QR code. Now, up until about 2 years ago, this QR code, I'd have to download it. And that was always annoying to me because I'm usually using it in slides, but now you can just click copy. And now if I come back to my slides and I come back to, I'll put it here, but I'll take it out again. Now I can just Control V for pasting it, and there it is. And I can make it bigger or smaller by dragging from the corner, right? So you can make any website into a QR code. Now, what's the one rule? Make it a nice, friendly, mobile-friendly website. Test it. Scan this QR code. I didn't know how terrible this was until I tried it out. Because on the web, because we have something, many websites are made so that they will change and they will look different on a horizontal screen versus a vertical screen. But if it's an older website or someone used their own coding or whatever, it might not change. And you don't know that when you're looking at it on a computer screen. So you really do want to test out what it looks like on your phone. All right, so the reason QR codes have become incredibly valuable, I always loved QR codes because I always had this issue where I was in workshops, I was seeing people once, I wasn't didn't have their email addresses. I couldn't send them links. I wanted them to all get to the same place at the same time. QR codes were fantastic for that. So for me, I was an early adopter and they had a very clear use for me. And they solved a problem I had with getting everyone to the same place at the same time. Since pandemic, I feel that QR codes have just exploded in our world as far as how frequently you see them. So this first image here is restaurant. That was not common before pandemic, that you would go to a restaurant and might not have a paper or, published menu. Now it's quite common that there'll be a link there and you can look at the menu before, or a QR code is there, and you can look at the menu before your server comes, or they might not even have paper menus. What's annoying is a lot of them use weird systems that you would scan that QR code and the menu would be tiny on your little phone, and that would make me very irritated because I'm like, brilliant use of QR codes, really, really poor execution. So don't do that. Make sure that the content is big. But that's a very common one. I know early days marketers were really trying to use QR codes. So we had QR codes on our subway system in New York, and it was before you had internet on the subway. And it was like, well, I can't scan the QR code if I don't have the internet. So that is something to be aware of, right? The QR code is only as good as the amount of internet you have because it's taking you to something online. There are some weird caveats to that, but generally that's what we're doing, right? We're taking you to some place online, so you need the internet to do that. So you need a device that has the ability to scan a QR code, and you need internet, Wi-Fi, data, whatever you want to be using, but be aware with learners, they might, and you yourself might have limited data. So you want to be generous with that. Maybe make sure you have Wi-Fi in the classroom. Here's another common example where QR codes now are showing up on bus stops. I think this is a bus stop. I've seen them in museums for more information. I've seen them on statues outside, so you can tell what the history of the statue is. This is the third example here is about, this is a very fancy QR code that's a circle. It's really a square inside a circle. And this is to help victims of Helen. And then you'll see, a lot of other, like sign up on a mailing list. You'll also just see QR codes, just a sticker with a QR code. And I'm not going to scan that one because who knows where it's taking me. So it's very good practice to let people know where the QR code is going to take them. And it's really good practice to have a link beside the QR code if you can, so people can type it in as well or take a picture and save it for later. One of the issues with QR codes, when again, in person, we would all make our QR codes now. And I would say to you, would you ever email someone a QR code? And people might say yes. And I would say no, because if I was to email you a QR code, how would you scan that QR code? If you're mostly accessing your email on your phone, the phone is the tool you would use to scan the QR code, yet that is where you're seeing the QR code. And in an email, just like in the chat, I can just give you the link. So QR codes are fun in that they can be mysterious, but they are generally not the best thing to be emailing each other. Just send the link if you're emailing. If you're doing WhatsApp, just send the link. But if you're putting stuff up on the wall, if you're handing out something, if you want to have a QR code on the desk, you can have a QR code that you can change where that QR code takes people. So you could have one single QR code that just stays there, but the content it points to can change. So there's good ways to use QR codes, and then there are other places that are just you're not really using the QR code magic of what it can really do. So what is the history of the QR code, or how did it come into being? Very quickly, it stands for quick response. It came after we had our original, I'm going to say it's UPC, the code that grocery stores started using in the 80s. So this came along in 94 to track parts of cars as they were putting them together. What happened in 2002? The first cell phone app that could scan a QR code. So suddenly we went from a manufacturing support that you had to have a special scanner to scan it to 2002, the beginning of when everyone who has a phone now has a scanner. That's when it became useful, right? Before that, there was no purpose in giving out a QR code. But when the phone started being able to scan the QR code, so that was 2002. And then what happened in 2020? I already said, right? Pandemic hit, and the use of QR codes as a touchless way of getting information, of accessing content without having to touch each other's papers, things like that. It again bursts on the scenes in a non-marketing way, in a much more practical, functional way. So a lesson that I've done with QR codes is a exercise we used to do in on my ESL class where people would bring in an image, and in the class we would do a lot of work around that image. There'd be pair work, there'd be some short paragraph writing about it perhaps, and then maybe the student would come up to the front of the room and talk about their picture. This does all of that, but as the very last element, the learner would actually record their voice, make a QR code to that recording, and then that could be up on the wall. So you could have a gallery walk around your room, image, QR code, link, people scan the QR code and can hear what the person is saying about their image. They can re-record it as many times as they want, so they're comfortable with it, but it is this magical component of hearing a voice while you're looking at the image. It's really quite powerful. And you could even have that just in your building, right? It doesn't have to be in your classroom. It could be something to promote adult ed stories in the room, in the whole building. So if you wanted to right now, you could scan that QR code. You'd hear me talk about this picture. We could ask questions after that as a comprehension piece. So there's a lot of things you can do with this combination of audio that people are accessing through their phones with a QR code. The tool that I use to do the recording is something called Vocaroo. And I'm going to very quickly go through Vocaroo. Vocaroo is amazing because it's one of the few tools that you can create without logging in. So I said earlier that usually when you're creating things, you have to log in. Vocaroo just lets you make a recording. So literally you go to Vocaroo, you click on that microphone button. It asks if it can use your microphone. You make your recording. And then when you want to share it, you get all these options. So you can make a QR code right there. You can just get the link. You could download the audio if you're not going to have access to the internet wherever you're going. These two images are different because one is what you see on a computer browser, but actually doing it on your phone, you can do that too. So people could record their voices on their own phones by going to Vocaroo. So this is the process of sharing. There you go. Okay. I already showed you this. So this is the part where you can make your QR codes by going to the cast, save, and share. So we already saw that. Things to consider. Keep it within your learning goal. What is it that you want people to have access to? Make sure that you have enough devices in the room that can scan the QR code. People can work in pairs, but be sensitive to people's data access, be sensitive to memory. There can be issues, but going to a website should not be a problem for most people. But just be aware of that. Know your people. And then make sure that the content is mobile friendly, and then create the QR codes that you need. And track, whenever you make those QR codes, you can just save them somewhere. You can save them as an image, you can put them on a document, but do keep that link there too, because then it'll be easier for you to know what the QR code goes to. All right, I'm gonna so we've looked at QR codes. I talked a little bit about how they are in the real world. We're gonna run out of time, so I'm gonna go pretty fast here, but in the chat, what are some real life skills? If you in your life have used QR codes, what did you need to know how to do to use a QR code? You're at a restaurant, you're in a grocery store, and you see a QR code. It's on the back of a can, it's in a museum. What skills did you need to scan that QR code usefully? And if you might, back when I used to first talk about this, everyone had seen a QR code, but a lot of people had never scanned them. Maybe you're still in that role. But that was a piece, right? People are just nervous. They don't know what it means. So I'm going to check the chat because I'm guessing there are lots of questions. Yes. So some basic skills, right? We need basic cell phone skills. Where is your camera app? Is that how you can scan a QR code? I didn't know that because I used to have this app. Yeah, not taking a picture of it. That's a pretty common one. I have a funny story of I was traveling in Sweden and I'd parked my car and I wanted to remember where my car was parked. So I was going to take a picture of the street sign of the corner where I was. So I took that picture and then I went off and had my day and was coming back to find the car. I looked at the picture and I took a selfie. So there was no picture of street signs. It was just me. Yeah, so spam being like when should you scan a QR code? When shouldn't you? Like, what is this a safe scan? If this is a safe QR code or not? Obviously, hopefully in class they will feel like you're doing that. Oh, and someone asked about the short URL. Yes, I can do that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about the fraudulent QR code, so I'm just looking through the chat. They're definitely, anyone can make a QR code and it can take you when you look at a QR code, I mean, people can make it look like it's going to take you. You can pay money to make a QR code with a brand in the middle or whatever, and you can make it look like it's going to take you somewhere and it might not. So that is some critical thinking for people to consider. I think in most establishments where QR codes are there, that's not going to be an issue, but again, good issue to bring up. Ooh, I see someone shared some nice QR code monkey.com. Thank you, Itri, for colorful QR codes. All right, so I'm gonna keep scooting through here. Do screen readers pick up on QR codes? That's an interesting issue. So what I would guess, what I would think is at the very least, if you're putting it in as a image, you could put alt text to say what a QR code, that it is a QR code, and then maybe have the real link there. That might be another reason to have the link available. I'll do some research on that because this is a real issue we often aren't paying enough attention to is accessibility. And a screen reader will look at what's happening on the screen and will read out what's happening. And if you don't add that alt text to say this image is a QR code, then it doesn't know what to do with that image. But again, that's probably why I would have a live link there too. And there are still apps. So if someone's camera isn't working or they have a version that doesn't have a QR code reader in it, there are still QR code readers to download. There are many of them, and I don't know that I can tell you if they're good or bad. I would just say you shouldn't have to pay money, and you shouldn't have to give them any of your information other than normal information to download an app. Because I've seen some QR code readers that ask for a lot of weird information. I'm like, nope, don't need to do that to get a QR code reader. I'm going to escape just for a second. Let's come back to do a shortened URL with bit.ly. I'm going to show you. Tiny URL is another one. That was the one I was trying to think of, and I saw someone put that in the chat. So bit.ly is bit.ly.com. It's changed a little bit. Oh, Chip, go ahead and speak. I see Chip raised their hand. Do they want to speak? Do we have to unmute them? Lindsay, I don't know. So when I'm just going to continue with this and then we can see what Chip wanted to share. You do need an account. It used to be a little easier. They've now made some limits because they do have a version that costs money. So you would log in. I think my login information will be here because otherwise I'll be in trouble. Yeah, I'm a good bad user of the internet. So when you get into bit.ly, I'm not paying for my account, so it's free. So I'm going to go to create new, and you actually can make QR codes here. For a while you could, and then you couldn't, and now you can again. So it's fantastic. So if I was going to take our slides from today, and I would get the share link, and I'm going to get the link down here, right? So anyone with a link is a viewer. Copy that link. It's sitting in the cloud. I'm going to come to bit.ly. I'm going to say that I want to make a link. Control V to paste it, and then hit enter. And this is the link that it made up for me. I can edit that. So if I come in here and edit it, I can make it into, oh, is it not? Yeah, edit the back half. So I can go in here and make this into a word. Now, the only rule is it has to be something that no one else has ever used. So, if you use the word GD, it's not going to be possible. Let's look at EdTech tools. So EdTech, I'm guessing, is taken. Yep. So then one of my tips is to use the date, because probably no one else did that. And that's relatively easy for people to remember. And then I hit save. And then if I want to make a QR code, I can do it right here. So again, this is colorful QR codes and all kinds of wacky looking ones and circles and all kinds of things, but you do need to pay for any of these ones that have little locks on them. And then again, you can right click and copy that and paste it wherever you want to paste it. Yes, thank you for sharing that, Danette. bit.ly.com. Right, so what happens when you scan a QR code is usually it's opening your browser, and therefore it's going to stay in your browser memory. It is one of the issues. Like the old days, it used to go somewhere in its own world, and it was hard to come back to the space where it was. Like you had a hard time. So in the apps, it would sometimes have a history and let you get back to it. But I believe now it just opens it in the browser in your phone. So you have to go back to the browser in your phone and find the tab where it is. All right, Chip, are you still have something to say? You can say it.
Actually, I'm sorry. I did not mean to unmute
Ah,
myself.
it's
I'll just say hi, everyone. Sorry about that.
It's fantastic. It's always good to have other voices here. So thank you.
Well, I'll chime in if I need to.
Beautiful. Okay, so back to our slide. So for each of these tools, I did try to put in a few links that are helpful, different ways to use QR codes in education. If you have ways you've been using them, please do share them in the chat because it's always really helpful to hear from adult ed teachers. These are mostly going to be things that are done for K-12, but definitely work for adult ed. And then if you want to make a QR code just separately, you can, KWA is one that I've used before, and the only trick there is you have to use this I want to continue. I mentioned earlier, you can have a single QR code and then change the link that it goes to, and that's called a dynamic QR code, and that usually does cost money. But I think, so with like the bit.ly one, I think you can't do that for the free version. So you might have to pay to do that. So you have to figure out if that's something that's really valuable to you, then you might want to consider getting a paid version to do the dynamic QR code. KWA, it's free to do the static, the static one, which is what I generally do. But if you want the dynamic one, it will cost money. Okay, so we're going to quickly move on to Quizlet. I think it's Quizlet that we're talking about. So I don't know if you've used Quizlet before. Quizlet, we're using it here in the idea of creation, in the idea that learners can create their own Quizlet sets. This is a Quizlet set that I created. If you scan this QR code and you know where I made it, you'll get to our Quizlet set, which is, I think, 6 vocabulary flashcards for GED. Learners can create their own accounts, and then they can take that set and make it their own and add new words, add tips for themselves, change it up. They can make their own wholly new study set. It doesn't just have to be vocabulary. This could be study sets on social studies, anything that you would use flashcards for. So that's the base of Quizlet, is that it's flashcards, but it has a lot of ways to take the flashcard information and make that into sort of a fun game to play. And one of the things with phones is that it's in your hand, you're waiting for the bus, you're waiting in line somewhere, maybe you're going to go play a game. It could be a Quizlet game instead of some other game. So learning could be happening everywhere, and it's on your phone. So it's not like you have to pull out a book or something else, which you might not want to do while you're waiting for the bus or whatever. So obviously very good for ESL. It can be very low level. You can have images as part of the word and the definition. So great, I think, for all levels. And on a phone, these are the 2 different ways you can see it. So this first view is what it looks like if you go through. Well, I was going to ask you the question. So there's a browser version and there's an app version. As I said earlier, for creation, you are going to have to make an account. So people are going to have to make a Quizlet account. If their phones are full or they don't want to download an app or they don't know how to download an app or they don't know their password to their app store, they can just go to Quizlet through the browser. And I'm going to say that the browser is the first one. Oops, sorry. I'll put that over there afterwards. Here, let's do it now. That was my idea. So the browser one, this is browser, and this one is the app. And the app is definitely more user-friendly, but it's absolutely not required. So again, you'll find out with yourself and with your learners if they are app people or they're okay doing the browser version. You can do it in both places. If you want to make your own study set, you log in. There is a teacher login, and I would advise you as a teacher to have that login because you get to do some back-end organizing and some game playing for the whole class that isn't part of the regular account. There's also this free trial shows up because they do have a paid version and you could try that out for a week. But everything I've done with the free version. So if people scan the QR code, it's gonna open the study set in their browser or in their app, and then they can save it to their own Quizlet and come back to it later. They can save it and edit it and make it their own. You as a teacher can create a class so that people join your class, they'll get whatever new study sets you put in there. So it's kind of a curation tool as well, but I want to really think about it as a place for learners to create their own study sets. So that's where the creation idea comes in. And as a teacher, you get these things. Quizlet Live is a bit like Kahoot. You get to play a game where everyone looks at the screen and sees one thing, and then on their devices, they see something else, and they can work in pairs or in breakout rooms on Zoom or in real life. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. Blast is like a real video game, like you're blasting things. It's crazy. Okay, so just to take you through the live, you get to be random teams or individuals. Both cases, each team or each individual will see all the questions, but they're actually going to see them in different order. And on the screen, you're just going to see the movement through 1 through 8, right? So if there are 8 questions, you're going to see that people are moving through, but you won't actually know by looking at that screen. You know, group 1 is looking at question 5 and group 2 is looking at question 2, but eventually they'll go through all the same questions. So it keeps it kind of randomized. One of the things I'll say about Quizlet that I find the most, you need a buddy to test it with, because what you see as the teacher is different than what the learner sees, and it's good to be able to do both simultaneously. So it's really a good one if you're working with some other teachers to have like a play date where you can try these out on each other so you really feel comfortable, because it is what the learner sees is different than what, or not, it's not the learner and the teacher, but the person kind of leading the game and the people playing the game see different things. And you can choose whether the questions are going to be the word and they have to choose the definition, or the definition, they have to choose a word. I did this with my niece who's like 11, and she learned all of these words very quickly. What she did not learn was how to use them. So Quizlet is great for definitions, but you are probably going to want to create some other activities. You could create some activities in here where you would have sentences and then they'd have to put the word in, but that was not easy for her. And she was very young and these were complicated words, but she learned them really quickly. It just, she didn't learn them in an actual contextual way, which goes to say that, you know, just studying vocabulary is never a really fantastic thing, but if you have vocabulary and you know how to use it, then this is a great way to kind of practice. And there's some, oh, I kept in the public maps, never mind. So originally when I did this, a very similar session, we did it on My Maps as a creation tool, but I'm going to take that out and we'll make sure we have some Quizlet things. So again, in the chat, real life skills that you might have to make your own study set. We didn't really go through it, so it might not be very clear, but even to use the study set, if you think about games that you play, maybe you do Sudoku, or, oh, what's that game that was so big for a while? Where you had to guess the word that became a New York Times game. You can put it in the chat for whoever remembers that. But anyway, there were a lot of, that was a game I woke up every morning and did, and then I talked to my friends about it. That was a pretty big one. And again, it did make me do some things on my phone that I hadn't done before. So let's see what people are saying. Wordle, thank you very much. So signing up for an account, again, deciding between an app and a browser version. Yeah, usernames and passwords, because in this case, you really do need to log in to the account. On the topic of ease of use, how do presenters provide the option to copy links to keep on a different doc? Today's chat listed delete as the only option. So Kathleen, is this the question of me? If I wanted to have my QR codes and a link, so in my ways I create my materials is I tend to have the link there, and so the short link would be there and the QR code would be there. I could, if it was in person, I could hand that out. I was just doing a workshop at a conference and I gave a handout that had a QR code and the link there. If I was saving it for myself, I would just have a Google Doc somewhere that I would be keeping all of this as sort of a library. Let's see if I answer that question. One idea, if we get learners to feel comfortable making these Quizlets for themselves, the feeling is that they'll use it for whatever their life brings to them, right? That there's always a time to study something. You're getting your driver's license, you're going to the citizenship test, you're taking some exam for work. There's always places where we need to do this kind of study, playful study, go on to post-secondary education. So some of these real life skills are more about like how we actually practice knowledge. Kathleen, did you add more about what you were looking for? For example, I clicked on the link for slides, but it did not open. I prefer copying it and then typing it on a doc for later use. Do you want to unmute and say more? Because I'm still not sure I understand. Are you talking about the slides I shared, the link to the slides that I shared today, which I can share again? Okay, so in this case, I went into the chat and pasted the link. So you have the link in the chat. And it is a shortened link. You'll notice I use something today called Shortio that allows me to put my agency name in there. So again, all my links are going to be link.lacnyc.org/ and then the rest of it is the part I change. So if I give that link to you, you click on that link, you're going to get to it's going to change it to the long link again. If this is Google stuff, what I would really practice is saving that. So if this was something that somebody else had given me, let me escape here. And this was something that came up quite often early days. So I give you a link and you go in and you put it into your computer and, oh, because it saved, yeah, slide, sorry, okay. Yeah, so it doesn't love it. Shortened links, this is one of the issues. You have to put them up in the Omnibox. Okay, so you get this crazy long link. This doesn't matter anymore, but you just want to come back to this. I wouldn't even save the link. I would now go in here and it's not going to show it because I am the person who made it. But if I go under File and I go down to Organize, where's my Add shortcut to Drive. So by clicking on the link, this slide presentation is now in your shared with me section of your drive. If I go back to my drive over here, I have a shared with me area. And by default, anything that anyone gives you a link to and you open, it's going to be in here. The problem with this is that it just keeps getting piled upon, right? So this link is going to slowly go down and down and down. It's not a great place to plan to come back to. So when someone gives me a link to a Google file of some sort, and so this is particularly for Google, but that is a very common one because that is something that is in the cloud, right? If it was a PDF or something else, I might make a shortcut. I mean, I might make a bookmark. That's another way that I keep my things. But in this case, I would go back over here. I would go under File. I would say Add Shortcut. When you first get this, you might get this little symbol up here somewhere, like here. And the first time you see it, you can do it there. But if you don't see it there, you can always find it under File. So add shortcut to my drive, I click on that. It's going to ask me, where do I want to put that shortcut? It's going to suggest some places, right? So this is my folder for Digital Inclusion Week. That's where I want to save it. I'm just going to go ahead and say add. And now when I go to my, let's see, my drive, if I go, I know where that folder is. That's the other question, right? So I know where that folder is because it's in my NICAID folder, in my Digital Inclusion Week folder, and I see the shortcut. So a shortcut is the icon with the little arrow. So I have it here now twice because it's here and it's also in my COAB folder. The shortcut is where I put it. And I know where I put it so I can come back to it. And you can have as many shortcuts to the same document as you want. So say you're working on something that should be here, but also should be in your folder called digital skills, or it should be in the folder called real life. So you could have this shortcut all over the place, so that you don't have to keep coming back all the way in here to find it. Did that answer the question? So you want links to paste in your notes for, gotcha. I would take the short link from the chat, yeah, I would take that. Or if you're in the slides, you can just grab this and put that in your notes and it will open up again for you. Or if you did put it into your folder from here, you could get the share link. So there are a couple of different ways to do it, right? You could come in here, go to the document that Nell shared with you and share it again to copy the link, and that link you could paste in your notes. That's a really good question. This issue of getting back, it was another great question about the QR codes, like getting back to the content that you got to once is huge. And people feel very insecure and very doubtful that they'll know how to get back to something. And I've seen people have really interesting ways to do that. So getting efficient with that, getting clear in what your process is a really great digital skill. All right, we're really, really running out of time. I'm going to scroll through down to here. So this last one is about Google Classroom. Google Classroom is huge. It's really kind of what we were talking about just now. How do you organize your content so you can get back to it? How do you organize content so your learners can find it? And that can be done using a variety of tools. I just used Google Classroom as an example. And everything we do in Google Classroom, even though that's an educational structure, those skills are ones that people are going to use probably in their post-secondary education, possibly in their work, where they have to know how to move around inside somebody else's file system, right? So there are some really great skills there. This is one of my, let me put it into, so this is one of my things, right? When you're deciding which tool to use, we have a variety of things to think through. One of the things, so take a tool, learn it deeply, get familiar with it. You'll try, it's that thing, you know, if you're a hammer, everything's a nail, that's fine. If you choose QR codes to be your thing for a while, go deep with it. But over time, you want to expand because there might be a tool out there that's better for a particular purpose. And the joke here is, do you need a car or radio? I'll make this easier to read in a moment. And the joke is a little bit like, if you just need a radio, don't buy a car. But if you need a way to get somewhere and a radio and it's raining outside and you have some money and you need to take some other people with you, then a car is a great idea. So you don't need all the bells and whistles for everything, but be clear in what your purpose is. That's kind of the root of all that. If you are interested in Google Classroom, there's a lot of slides here about it. And then there's a lot of resources about, I know people often have been using it and then have very specific questions about like, how do you change the due date on a document, and that some of that will be here. If you have questions about any of this stuff, you can always email me. I'm always very, very happy to hear how people are trying out these tools. Challenges and fantastic successes, all of those things make me I'm very, very excited to hear about them. We do have the Literacy Assistance Center has put together a whole series of playlists. So if there are tech tools out there, we've usually made a playlist for it. So if you go to that link, you'll find our YouTube playlist where we've curated helpful videos for you, not just ones we've made ourselves, but ones that the world has made. So that's it. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to look at the chat to see if anyone has questions that we didn't get to. So Susan says she has an issue with one domain not talking to others. You mean the domain of a domain in a email and in a URL sort of way? We'll see what you mean by that. So I see Stacy asks, and I'm just going to talk a little longer if you have to leave. I know that, and I'll get off very soon, Lindsay. I'm sorry. Stacy, I see your question about the pros and cons of Google Classroom and Google for Education. So Google for Education, I think you're talking about workspace, and that costs money. If you have that, that's a great thing to go with. I don't know in the end. I think you might end up really utilizing Google Classroom anyway. But Google Classroom is free. So I don't think we have anything on that. If you find anything about that, you can share it with me and I'll add it to our playlist or add it to our content online. All right. Again, feel free to email me. Wonderful seeing you all today. Happy Digital Inclusion Week. Onward and upward with the techiness. So fantastic to have you all here. Lindsay, was there anything you needed to say at the end?
No, we're all set. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us today. And thank you, Nell, for your great presentation. Have a
My
wonderful
pleasure.
afternoon.
And great to see so many people here.